Not yet.
Is nothing showing up on the stream?
There you are. I got you.
All right, this is Keith, and welcome to another Facebook and YouTube Live. And I'd like to know who's out there today. I'd like to know where you're from. So give me a big proverbial Facebook or YouTube wave and let me know where you're from. Hopefully having a good night. Here in Minnesota, it's 90 plus with humidity. We're not used to this warmth, but that's why I'm wearing the t-shirt and making it a great day. Now, if you are just stumbling on this live stream and don't know who I am, my name is Keith. I'm a nurse with 36 years of clinical experience in a wide variety of settings, including the ED, ICU, and most recently in the critical care float pool. But I'm a nurse educator that's newer and never left the bedside of patient care. And I created some practical and innovative strategies to help educators transform the way they teach based on the book. Pat Benner's Educating Nurses, A Call for Radical Transformation. Now, this book came out 10 years ago. If you're looking for a summer read, this is one of them I'd like you to put on your short list, because the things that I'm sharing are going to help bring that innovation. Pat Benner and her co-authors really laid the foundation for me as a newer educator to strengthen my practice. And I'd like to know how many of you are newer out there yourself. I mean, less than 3 years. And as you know, like novice to expert, it takes 2 to 3 years to get proficient and competent in your experience. And so as you've been with me in this journey, we've been this like our 7th or 8th week, and I'm excited to be here again. We've talked about some general principles of eliminating infobesity, TMI in the content, talking about innovating the classroom, bringing that active learning. And so if you've missed those, go to my Facebook page, Keith RN, Think Like a Nurse. And on the far left column is videos. All you have to do is click that. They're free. And you can catch that content that you may have missed. And for those of you that weren't here last week, we talked a little bit about failure to rescue and how important it is to practice scenarios of complications. So this is one thing I'd love all of you to do. I talked in my very first Facebook Live about case study scenarios. You can write your own. And I would like you to think about the complications that you see in your practice settings. Write a scenario. But there's one vital sign that is most vital that I talked about last week, that if there's the earliest vital sign to change, I'm not going to tell you. I want you to go to the Facebook Live. But more importantly from last week, one thing that's in the literature that kind of disturbs me is that intentionally discussing and talking about nurse failure to rescue is not in the curriculum of many and most nursing programs. And I want you to look at kind of like what's in your wallet with Capital One. I'm not promoting them in any way, but what's in your curriculum? You know, we're over the summer, and as you know, the curriculum is foundational to the knowledge and values we must translate to the next generation of professional nurses. We must be talking about failure to rescue, that nurses can harm and even kill patients when they miss a trend of a concerning heart rate, vital sign, respiratory rate, etc. So be sure that we're talking about it in your curriculum and use case-based scenarios to talk about it. Clark and Aiken, C-L-A-R-K-E and A-I-K-E-N, talked about this in 2003 on nursing failure to rescue. I don't recall the specific name of the article, but if you just Google fail to rescue Clark and Aiken 2003, you'll find it. that's a must read. And it's not always about the nurse, but it's also about the staffing ratios and how high that caseload is. So I just want you to kind of keep failure to rescue on your radar because we need to talk about it. And as we look at our stories as educators, we're all on a journey and on a story. And it's kind of like the question is, why did you become an educator? And, why are you doing what you're doing? I think we all ask ourselves that question from time to time. And, just a thought that I just want to share with you is kind of just briefly, I never wanted to be a nurse. I wanted to be a flight medic with an RN behind my name as well. Never got to be the bird in the sky. But you know what? I've really enjoyed the ride, and it's really been a blessing for me. And nursing has been a powerful and just, I love what I do in the nursing profession. But for you on your journey, do you kind of wonder, where it's taking you? Do you kind of wonder why you're in nursing education? One book that I read about 15 years ago, Wild at Heart by a Christian author, John Eldredge, had this quote that he said. He said, "Don't ask yourself what the world needs. Ask yourself what makes you come alive and do that. Because what the world needs are people who have come fully alive." And I think if we're honest with ourselves, the reason we're in nursing education, it's not for the pay, but it's because it makes us come alive. We love what we do. But there's a problem. Nursing education is a joy-stealing environment. That's in the literature, by the way, as it relates to a lot of the negatives of incivility and other things that can derail our journey. There's a reason you're in nursing education. There's a reason that I wound up in nursing education. I'm so thankful for it. But one of the things that we're going to talk about tonight, I'm really excited. For the first time, I'm going to have a guest with me. Her name is Paula Belknap, and she's at the University of Wyoming, and she's going to share her journey and story in this context. Is that many of you have heard me share the things that I've done in my classroom, innovating, students not always loving it. Can I do that? Many of you may wonder, do I have what it takes? And I want to say, yes, you do. And I want you to share, now I don't want to just share my story because many of you know it. You know me. I want someone else to basically share their journey and their story so that you can be encouraged and look at another everyday educator who simply took the steps of implementing educational best practice. And I can tell you, just like in clinical practice, best practice works. That's why we need to read Pat Benner's book, Educating Nurses. And if you're already on page with Benner's transformational paradigm shifts that I've just brought to life, you know what? Share that book with your colleagues. Get everybody that you are linking arms with in your department on that needed change platform. So I'm excited to bring someone here into this live stream. Unfortunately, we were going to do it by video. We have the technology, but how many of you know that technology is a two-edged sword? It can either work beautifully and you love it, or sometimes it's like not loving it. Well, tonight we're going to have to compromise. I'm going to bring Paula in by phone. I was hoping to have her on the screen, but you know what? You're going to hear her like a phone interview for about 15 minutes or so. We're going to talk about her journey and her story. But Paula is a PhD, MSN, CNE, who's been an RN for 28 years in long-term care, telehealth, and acute med-surg and orthopedics. Like I said, she's a prof at the University of Wyoming, has 15 years of teaching experience. So she's been, and she's also recent in practice as well. And she's a rock star, in my opinion. She not only has her CNE and PhD, but she also received the Wyoming Innovations in Teaching Award by the Wyoming Department of Education. So I'm just pleased to bring in with you Paula. And Paula, can you hear me?
I can. Can you hear me?
All right, Paula, I sure can. And I want to make sure, can the audience hear Paula? So tell me, I just kind of looking at my feed here. And Paula, one of the things I just wanted to kind of just right at the very beginning is tell us a little bit more about your journey in nursing education. Why did you become an educator kind of halfway through your career? You could have stayed and made a little more money in that context. Just kind of tell us, kind of what brought you into nursing education.
Well, actually, Keith, it kind of fell in my lap. I never read the newspaper, and I just happened to pick it up that day from boredom. And then there was an ad for one of the local high schools and wanted a CNA clinical instructor. And I figured after I read the description, I was like, well, I think I can do that. And it kind of morphed from there, adjunct, full-time, community college, and now I'm at the University of Wyoming. I've been there. This will be my third year starting, coming from community college. And I don't know, that's kind of, I never wanted to be an educator. I always wanted to be a nurse since I was 5 years old. But as an educator, it kind of came. If you ask the students, though, they've always told me, they said, regardless whether you teach officially or not, you are always going to be an educator if you're teaching somebody something somewhere.
Absolutely.
So I don't know how to take that, but
okay.
that's what it is.
Awesome. Awesome. And tell me, Paula, I know for myself, when I went into nursing education, I went in because I loved to teach, and it was like, it made me come alive. But yet when I went into the classroom and I had students who didn't share my passion, in fact, they kind of gave me that proverbial, what do I need to know to pass the test? That kind of deflates any nurse educator, but I'd like to know, what are some of the challenges, as you began your journey, and what are some of the things that you're experiencing today that, and we'll kind of how you overcame them, so we don't have to stay stuck in ruts, but what are some of the challenges that you're facing? Because sometimes I think as educators, we think it's me. I'm alone in this, and we don't recognize sometimes that our struggles that we experience are shared. So I'd love to know a little bit more about your journey and struggles.
Well, when I first started, I'd agree. In clinical, I thought it was easier to teach because I knew that. We all come from the clinical bedside. We're all very awesome nurses clinically. So I thought I could do that. But the teaching piece and how to kind of morph the two or bridge the two together between the clinical and the classroom was the challenge. And I started out like most of you guys probably did that are here, those 120 slide decks. Talk, students half awake, they're probably shopping, Facebook and whatever else they're doing out there. And so that's kind of what I was faced with at the beginning was being really good at the bedside, but not having a clue how to teach nursing students, I think is what my issue was.
Mm-hmm. Okay. What about some of the student challenges? I mean, as you kind of, we'll talk about your journey. Would you say, Paul, that when you began, you kind of taught like everybody else, content heavy, slide deck, primarily lecture? Was that kind of, when you look back at your 15, when you began kind of in those first years, was that kind of your approach?
Yeah, I taught how I was taught, which
Yep.
is like a lot of us do.
Yep.
And until I actually got my master's and postmaster certificate in nurse education,
Yep.
That's kind of what I did,
Yeah. And
that's all I knew.
yeah, and I think that's really a great point that, it's kind of like we don't know any better, especially as newer educators, when you look back at how we were taught as nurses, how we were taught in high school, in most of our grade school days, it was basically, kind of a teach to the test, lots of content, and kind of breaking out of that mold. And so when you look at that, our paths, we have never met personally. Well, we did at a conference where I presented about 7 years ago, but would just like to know kind of just share kind of how our paths crossed, what you took away, and kind of just in the last few years, just kind of where your journey has taken you.
I think it was about maybe 7, 8 years ago is what we decided. I happened to attend a conference. I was in this rut of the 120 slide decks, hated it, students hated it.
Yeah.
Went to a breakout session, and lo and behold, there was Keith. And I was so excited by your energy, your passion. You were so excited about teaching, and then you brought in these unfolding case studies and how they could be used in these questions. And the light bulb went off, and I got so excited that I was like, I got to go back and change everything, which was the dumbest thing I could have ever because overwhelming changed everything. I've learned nothing.
Slow and steady still wins the race. Yeah.
Yes, I had some cognitive overload myself, but you go to conferences, you get excited, you get these ideas, and then you want to go back and implement it because you get this renewed energy.
Yeah.
And I did get to meet you there in your little table you had and talk to you a little bit, and how do I get access to these things and get it done?
Yeah.
And that was the beginning of my Keep RN journey. And it has been a journey for 7-8 years now to get to the point I am now. Which I feel we all always have room to grow, just like we tell our students, lifelong learning. That's what we do.
So kind of like, what did you do, when you look back, like maybe in those, so if you were to kind of state, do you think you did too much change? Or is there no such thing as too much change? What would what was your what did you take away from that conference as you could see practical strategies of making learning active, realize, bringing clinical realities into your class and unfolding like it does in practice? How did you then make it practical, Paula? Because that's really the challenge. We can get all the greatest information in a conference, and we always, we do, and we want to change the world. But yet, kind of, what did you practically do, and kind of what was the response of not only students but also faculty colleagues?
At the time when I came back, I was at that entry-level educator position, and I was all excited. One of my colleagues that went with me, we were all excited, and we were going to come back. And at the time is when the flipped classroom became the big issue in nursing education. And so we were all like, okay, we can do this. Make them prep outside, bring in case studies, those types of things, get them active in the classroom. What I didn't know is what I actually was doing at the time is what we're now calling a scrambled classroom, because I still gave them like I tried to give them a summary of the information. It was still too long, but, going from 120 to 82 is still too much.
Yep.
And so, doing the flipped classroom, I thought was the most, the two of us thought it was the greatest idea in the world. Students not so excited because, like you said, they want to be a little spoon-fed, they want to be handheld, and they want to know exactly what's on the test, how do I get my A and move on, right?
Yeah.
And when you are the only one or two in a whole group that are doing it this way, and the others are still the lecture, that kind of stuff, and not everybody's on board, you stand out like a sore thumb, you're the one that gets the batty bells, and students aren't happy. But did I drop it? No. I'm a little persistent, as you know me now. It's like I wasn't about to give up. I knew this was going to work somehow. I just didn't know how to morph it and change it to get the students on board at the time. And
so, when you look back, Paula, how did that culture change? Because I had the same experience with my students when I did version 1.0 of my unfolding case studies before they were even written for, other educators. I was just teaching my content just differently. My students, took weeks to get acclimated, but by the end of the semester, they even before then, began to see the value. And I'm just kind of curious, how long did it take your students to kind of basically, so that educators don't give up too soon? Sometimes, we throw it in or we change before we really realize that needed change. And so kind of how long did it take? Because that's a really good question. I'd like to know in Wyoming, I teach here in Minnesota, in Wyoming, what did that look like? What was that journey with your students?
And what I have found, Keith, is it doesn't matter where I am in the States, when I'm going to live conferences and things or talking to people, everybody has the exact same issues and problems. And I think going to these conferences or being online with Zoom people now and being able to hear their issues, you do realize, hey, I'm not by myself.
Right.
Everybody else is experiencing the same thing. That's great because being in a silo, you really are lonely. Or you think you're in a silo. And so being able to speak and get information and talk and bring it back. And I think the thing with all the students I have taught, there is a little bit of a learning curve depending on where they come from. Who did they have before me? What classes did they have before? Was it bridged well so it's not a fire hose? Going from like a lower level to a really high level. And the students start doubting their own selves. They think they're not smart enough. They shouldn't be a nurse, those types of things.
Yep.
And so I think the most important things I do has nothing to do with any of the stuff we're about to talk about at the beginning. It really is about setting up the environment to be one of trust so that they know they're safe, that I value their feedback regardless. There is no repercussions for anything that they say. Obviously if they say some things to me, it's bad, but when we are on the same page, I treat them as my peers because they are going to be my peers in a very short time.
Yeah.
I think nursing's unique that way. And so I think if you set up the environment first, let them know we are going on this journey. It's going to feel like drinking from the fire hose, but trust me, in that next 2-3 weeks down the road, you're going to start getting it. And usually by midterms, they're like, I know what you're trying to do. I understand the method to your madness. Yes. And then by the time we're finished, they got it and they carry it forward.
Yeah, and that's an excellent point. So I want you all to understand that basically, you know what, it's not going to be the first week that they're just going to love this, because as you know, this requires more work for your students. And so again, they're in stress mode. They're burdened, and I wouldn't say they're burned out, but they're overwhelmed and overloaded, and any extra work can kind of set them back. And that's where we need to, again, gently be persistent. And it only took about mid-semester, only about, 3 to 5 weeks, Paula? Were you teaching every week in the classroom?
Yeah, we got about 14, 15 weeks.
Yeah, so about halfway through, 5 to 6 weeks. And so I really think that's really a great takeaway for all of those who are listening and viewing this, is that, don't expect rainbows and butterflies first, second, or third week. But yet tell them that big why of why we're doing this. Again, that nursing is a practice-based profession, and that bringing practice, not content. We're going to do both. Bring content with the practice of the case studies where we practice the thinking. That's going to prepare them for practice, and it does take time. One question I have, Paula, is that where did you teach in the curriculum? Were you like a second-year faculty, and so you were just kind of getting them in that second-year phase, or what semester did you teach?
When I was at the community college, it was second, third, and fourth semester, so I had them all except the first one. And then now at the university, I'm in the junior year. I did one semester in the senior year. Okay. And then starting in spring, I'll start with them as sophomores. Okay. So I'll get to lay some foundation there too. So that might help. One
of the questions I have, Paul, it sounds like you were kind of an outlier, innovating and doing the active learning. Your colleagues in the first semester, a second semester that came before you, they were not doing this, correct, for the most part?
Correct.
Okay.
I have a colleague now who we've kind of gone together for our job. She got on board and helped me. Yeah. And so we but you're still for fun.
Would you agree, Paula, that if they had exposure to unfolding case studies, even if they were just simple as pie, but simple case studies at the fundamental level, for example, from the beginning of the program, using the knowledge, applying knowledge, and just simple 20, 30-minute case studies, and then when you got them at the second or third semester, do you think it would have been as traumatic for your students, or do you think that really would have helped decrease some of the resistance that it took several weeks to get the buy-in? Just would like your thoughts on that.
I think so, but what I think what students think sometimes are two different things, but I believe that if we can get them started day one thinking like a nurse, that is their nursing journey, is day one is when it starts. Yeah. And I am going to find out very soon, because the sophomore group that now I get to have teaching, I am going to do exactly that, is bringing in your fundamental skinny reasoning pieces, small drinks from the fire hose,
that's
to
right.
get them used to some of the thinking.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I'll see if it works.
No, and that's a really good point I want to really highlight for those who are viewing today. And this is why I talked about in even the earlier weeks, as far as why we need to take case-based learning, clinical scenarios, from the day one, from the beginning, again, kind of doing both, that we're bringing the good content, need to know content, but then contextualizing it with application at those fundamentals levels. You can bring in a relatively complex scenario, but just highlight those fundamental concepts that are relevant, therapeutic communication, the caring, because what that's going to do, and what we need to do, I think, in our departments, Paula, and I think you'd agree, is that if we're all on the same page, it's kind of like we are all burning the same ships of content-heavy classrooms, heavy PowerPoint slide decks, and give them the information, but with no context. If we can all get on the same page, it sounds like what you're saying, and I would agree with my observations, it would have increased not only student learning, but the students they just say this is the way it is. They wouldn't fight it or resist it because you're the one who's being difficult and making them work a little extra harder than the other faculty and creating some unnecessary stress. Would you agree?
Yes.
Yeah.
And now at the University of Wyoming, we're trying to streamline it. The two of us that are in the sophomore level do exactly what you're saying. Get them from day one, introduce it, get used to it,
Excellent.
build up to the junior year. And then I noticed my director's on here. Hi, Kim. She's going to start in the senior year and continue this. And then the hope is they just keep applying it, build higher level NCLEX, get to the bedside and maintain. So
yes,
we'll
yes.
see.
No, that's great feedback, Paula, and I'm excited to see you kind of just, again, just moving that journey forward. I think it's really important. I mean, if there's one thing, kind of like a conference that, your whole department typically is not attending. But what I would really encourage you, what's very powerful about these Facebook Lives is that you can take what we're talking about today or earlier weeks, get those links to your department, and have those conversations as a department. Say, is this guy just a highly caffeinated outlier, or is he saying something that we as educators need to listen to? And again, if it's best practice, it really isn't optional. So, all of you are evangelists in a very powerful and practical way. Paula was one, she basically took the things I shared and brought those needed changes. It can't just be in your content is my point. We've got to leaven the lump. We've got to be an influence that really, doesn't just say, well, I'm just going to, just kind of keep it to myself or just do my own content. But yes, do that, but get the word out, because this is really how we can transform nursing education, one educator at a time. So in closing, Paula, I'd just like to get some thoughts. As you look ahead, you kind of shared what you're going to be doing in the in the next semester, but I'd like to know just in general. We all have a story. We all have pearls and wisdom that we have learned the hard way in our journeys. Sometimes I think difficulties and trials, though we resist them and hate them in the moment, when you look back, you can see this really, it's kind of like that pearl. It's an irritant, but it made something beautiful out of my journey, my story, and how I teach. And I guess for me, Paul, I'd love to know just your thoughts on, as you look at the difficulties and challenges that you experienced, as you kind of got out of the bubble of doing it the way it's always been done, making it active and bringing that context. Despite the difficulties, what are some of the pearls that kind of basically came that you can look back and say it was worth the journey? And what would other educators be encouraged by? Because really, nursing education is hard. I think it's harder than clinical practice in many ways. And so those who are in the trenches need to be encouraged. And so I'd like to know just what are some thoughts that you could share with them, that your pearls from your school of hard knocks, that would be helpful.
Which we all have these, I know, and some of these could be similar. I know one of the things is learn to trust your own clinical experience and knowledge coming in, because it's valuable in applying it in the classroom, bringing those patients to the classroom. Use your experience and those patients you've taken care of there. Yeah. You can use those to develop your own case studies. Yeah. There's a lot of people out there, from Keith to Iggy to all these people that have ways to help you very easily to develop the case studies. But trust your own experience and bring it into the classroom. Yeah. I think you need to find items like I did with yours, Keith, a long time ago. Learn to trust the stuff that you've been given. Learn how to use it. Reach out to the people who developed it, so that you know how to use it appropriately. And if you're lost, ask. That's what I've been doing. I've been checking information from all kinds of people for 10 years now.
Yeah, and I've gotten a few emails from you as well, Paula, I think, over the years. That's a good thing.
Yes, a lot of them. What do I do with this?
I never mind.
And then eventually over time, though, you learn it's like, all right, I can trust this. And what I mean by trust is, I think when I first started, I thought I have to teach them everything in every book and every chapter, every page, and everything that I know. And there's just no way, there's not enough time, and it changes too fast for us to do that. So I think if you can trust to use your tools that you have given to decrease the amount of content, use the cases for active learning and bringing patients to class, trust that process, it's going to work too. Just not on the students, wanting them to trust your process. You have to trust it too.
Yeah.
Some of the stuff that I've learned over the summer going to webinars now, which I knew is just sometimes you got to hear it again, is you have to make everything that you do, all assignments, all activities, have to be relevant. They have to be meaningful. They should be pre-planned, right? Those types of things.
Yeah.
Know that one of the big things that I learned, I did not know these numbers, retention from lecture only is only 5%.
Yeah.
If you add even one active learning strategy, like your case studies, it goes up to 50 to 90% retention.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It depends on the active, which is like simulation, which yours are low fidelity simulation, like you said. So you can increase that retention when they walk away from your classroom up to 90%. So that's why I'm saying reach out to the people who put this stuff together, find out how to use it, find out how to use it well, and you can get them up to 90% retention, which is important, trying to connect. I always get asked about, because I'm in concept-based curriculum now, statewide curriculum, concept-based learning, how do you determine what you choose, what you put in there so it's not overwhelming? The easy thing to do is you Google, you look at those books, you get the experts, you find the common things that are out there, and then you assess your own state. What are most common admissions, injuries, career fields, stuff like that? Pull those in.
Yeah.
It seems simple now. As simple as there's still a lot of work goes in all the time, as we know, but if I would have trusted the process, got the front loading in early, I would have probably had 10 years of my life back. Mm-hmm. But we all have to go through that struggle, right? Yeah. And go through it. The other big thing I will tell you guys, if you're new to using Keith unfolding case studies, is through all of these webinars, I've been going through a lot this summer because of Zoom and and online, is when you look at his critical thinking questions, critical reasoning questions that are tied throughout the case, and you compare that to what they're looking for with the NCSBN's clinical judgment model. When you go from nursing process to Tanner's to his case studies, and you look at that judgment model, he is asking the exact same things they're looking for. They may not be worded exactly, but when you look at what's relevant, analyze it, what is the problem, prioritize it, evaluate this, debrief, add caring, all that in, that is exactly what that clinical judgment model is asking for. Yeah. So I put that together this summer that I trusted your process before, but now it meets. Yeah. So we're going. The next gen piece, I think you've been there for about 8-9 years already.
Yeah, and the thing is, Paul, great feedback, and thank you so much for sharing. And just when you look at what really what I've done with my case studies and why you see that mirror reflection of the NCSBN 6-step model is that if you understand and know Tanner's model of clinical judgment and her 4 steps of what do you notice, what's the interpretation of the meaning of these cues, how are you going to respond, what's your reflecting or evaluation, those 4 steps are integrated, almost directly correlating into the NCSBN model. And so Tanner's model is really a reasoning framework that I've intentionally integrated into all of the case studies, and they don't change regardless of the topic. So just like nursing process is an iterative or repetitive process, so is clinical reasoning. And that's why the structure stays the same, Paula. So I want to thank you so much. And I just want to say a blessing over you. And thank you so much for all you're doing, and continue to just be the needed change and bring a few of your colleagues and bring your department with you. And it's exciting to see that. I think from what I've inferred, they're getting on the train. Is that correct?
They are. And awesome. If not, I know my director's on here. She'll help me get them online books.
So leadership is called the sheriff. And when there's a sheriff in town that basically is holding faculty to educational best practices, we can bring that change even a little easier, because it's much easier for the sheriff to do it and to lead the train than for the fellow colleagues who can just kind of don't have that same power. So thanks again, Paula. It's been a pleasure. And I thank you for being here with us tonight. I'm sorry we couldn't get you on the screen, but you know what, maybe another time, okay?
Thanks, Keith. Thanks,
blessings.
everybody.
You bet. And one of the things I've got some closing thoughts I wanted to share. Paula did a wonderful job of just kind of tying her journey together with really best practices. But one of the things I want to encourage, if you're a newer educator, you know what? You have the most to offer your program because you have that lens of recent practice. And I just want to encourage you, take your stories, take the things that Paula shared of bringing, your trust to your clinical gut. You as all of us are nurses at one time in practice. We know what practice looks like. So I love what Paula said about trusting your gut and your intuition as it relates to recognizing really what's meaningful and what's not, what's busy work. And we can see that sometimes, what's nice to know versus need to know. And so again, great insight. And I want to, for all of you, I want you to fill this chat with a lot of love with Paula. We can't applaud her. We're doing this, unfortunately, not in a conference setting. But the bottom line is I love what she had to share. And another thing I want to highlight, the importance of collaboration, getting on the same page with your colleagues. For me, when I was doing these transformational changes, I was all alone. None of the other faculty wanted to go that direction. I kind of did what I had to do, but getting your department, getting faculty to buy in, and I just want to encourage you that Pat Benner's book, Educating Nurses, and just highlighting that for your faculty provides the why of best practices. So I really want to encourage you to do so. And one practical thing that just a powerful principle of the power of together. Solomon, the wisest man of ancient Israel, said this: 2 people are better off than 1, for they can help each other succeed. If one person falls, the other can reach out and help. But someone who falls alone is in real trouble. And as nurse educators, that's a life principle. But in principle, we can't do transformational change alone. We need each other. We need community. And it needs to begin with our departmental colleagues that we can influence, and we can kind of link arms with just 1 or 2 that can be that needed change, that can leaven. And if you're not aware of my Facebook group for nurse educators, Teachers Transforming Nursing Education, that's a wonderful supportive community where you can just post a question and get immediate, literally within minutes, at least 1, 2, or 3 responses and get the ball rolling. You don't have to stay stuck. So I want you to go there, let me know you're an educator, and as the admin, I'll get you inside. And just want to let you know that if you have questions, I'm available. Just email me as Paula has done, and I'm responsive because it's my heart to serve the needs of nurse educators. Keith@keithrn.com. And so as you just look at, as I look ahead to the future, I want to let you know I'm a type A driven dude. I'm going to need to slow down just a little bit as I'm finishing up my dissertation. I wouldn't say I'm burned out, but I'm tired. And you know what? The tyranny of the urgent can always be pressing. And that's a powerful article. I want you to Google Tyranny of the Urgent PDF. There's always the urgent. But what's most important in life? To me, it's relationships. And they've suffered somewhat through this journey. So you know what? I'm not going to take a complete break, but about every 2 weeks from this point forward, it's going to be every other Thursday. We're going to be doing this. And so I just want you to be aware of that. So don't freak out. But I'm looking forward to slowing down just a little bit. And I also have 2 quick questions. Do you have, what topics do you want addressed in future Facebook Lives? This is not about Keith RN. This is about serving your needs. And I'd like to know just what you're wanting. So I want you to fill up that chat. And I want you to give me what topics, where are you struggling in nursing education? And whether it be students, faculty, teaching, learning, what is it that you need? Because I'll do my best to serve your needs. So I need to know what you need moving forward from here. I could be talking about infobesity till the sun comes home, or the cows come home, but I don't want to go there because I know we've talked about it already. So I want to know where you're coming from and what we can do. Another question I have for you all is this. I would love to give you the stage in a Facebook Live. I don't need, I want people like Paula. They've got something to say. There are people out there who have written dissertations that have not been published, who have something to share. that's relevant to nursing education and student learning. If you've developed creative activities, things that would benefit, I want to know. So fill up that chat and I'll contact you by instant message and follow up if and would love to kind of get a docket, because I'd love to just really in the future with Facebook Lives really give you that opportunity to shine because you've got something to share. And, and just wanted to let you know that as you look at the resources that I've developed, I've got a website, as you know, keithrn.com, and I've got a free case study on COVID-19. And it's powerful, practical. If you're looking for a respiratory exemplar that's relevant, I'd love you to have it. Just go to my homepage, fill out the email, get my updates, stay up to date with what I have available, and just what I'm doing that's new. I've got some great things, exciting things happening. I've also got a book I've written called Teach Students to Think Like a Nurse. And this is something that's in writing. I love paper. I love to mark up my books. If you found these Facebook Lives helpful, there's so much more in the book that can help get the wheels spinning and help you connect the dots. And if you purchase it on keithrn.com, I'd love to give you a discount of 20%. Just put KeithRN20 in the coupon code and do that. I got about 25 to 30 topics of unfolding cases on my KeithRN store, but I've got over 110 across the curriculum of cases in my membership for nurse educators, thinklikeanurse.co, which really is my best value for educators. It has PowerPoints for case studies. It's got a lot of other handouts and resources and even teaching with contact hours to put it all together. And so in closing, what was your big takeaway from this? And Paula, I didn't mean to, I want to put Paula back on because I'm going to get her on my phone here because some of you have questions. And we'll just let Paula come on board. I'd like to know, what questions do you have for Paula or myself, and write those down. So if you've got some closing questions. Hey, Paula. What questions do you have as you guys close down? And some of the things that Paula shared, is there anything that you'd like to ask either myself or Paula in closing? I'd love to know what they are. So I'm just going to stay for a moment. Hey, Paula, I'm going to see if there's any questions coming in, so don't go away, okay? This is just kind of spontaneous here, but I want you to stick around. And so, yes, I want to thank you all for giving me permission to reset and refresh. Looking forward to it. But again, this is not a burden for me, but I just need to kind of just, find that little bit of margin and rest that hasn't been present for way too long in my journey. So as you look at this, I'm just going to wait and see if there's any further comments or feedback. And if there's any specific questions, and I'm just seeing nothing coming through, though I'll wait just a moment. And yes, and I will, I see some topics, though, that you'd like. I see virtual clinical from Martha. And, Martha, if you have some specific thoughts as far as what type of things on virtual clinical, I will definitely kind of be on top of that. And Don, I'm kind of looking at some of the feedbacks here. Don's saying the best thing I ever did was have the dean purchase Benner's book for faculty after Elsevier conference where I met Keith and Pat. Wonderful, Don. I want to see a picture because I don't know, the name is not familiar, but thank you. And I'm glad that I could be an encouragement to you in your journey. So anyways, got a question here from Mary Ellen. I'm teaching foundations for the first time. Do you have case studies that can be incorporated into class? And I do, Mary Ellen. In fact, you can use any of my skinny reasoning case studies that are really the shortest and most concise, that capture the essence of clinical reasoning, as well as nursing process, and just kind of putting that together quite simply. If you're inside the membership, though, I have a case study level that is called Fundamental Reasoning. I don't have it on my KeithRN store. It's only in the membership, but they are case studies that are specifically for fundamental students that go deeper on pathophysiology, pharmacology, lab values, fluids and electrolytes, and help them to just go deeper on the sciences than my traditional case studies do. So I would commend you to that. The membership has a monthly option of about less than $50, and that you can, in essence, have access at that rate, or you even have departmental memberships at a significant discount for your entire department, which is really the best value, and would encourage your department to look at that if there's an interest, Mary Ellen. So thanks for sharing. Other than that, I'm just looking here, and I want to thank you all. I'm just going to call it a day, and thank you for the opportunity to come together once again for Facebook Live. We'll see you in 2 weeks. And you guys enjoy your summer, and hope you're getting the chance to reset and refresh so that you too can be restored as you look ahead to the upcoming fall. Thanks so much. You guys all have a great night.